Computer. All right, we're ready to get started. Beautiful. Thank you, everyone, for joining in for what we're hoping is a 30 to 40 minute just presentation on what our church and leadership has been up to over the last, I'd say, 10 months in a strategic plan. And who is here with me tonight is Gail Stein and Neil Corvallis, who have been our chairs and the key implementers and leaders of this massive undertaking. And I have the pleasure of just saying very minimal intro things about why we're here. And then I turn it over to them for the nitty gritty and the most important. So we have a presentation, we have some technology, and we're hoping it all works well. I'm going to open us in prayer and then explain where we came and where we are. Loving God, we are grateful to be a church that hears your call and continues to grow and progress and think to the future. Lead us, guide us, and challenge us to be creative and bold in all that we say and do. Amen. So strategic plan. We've done many of these over the years, and we are back. We are coming out of pandemic. Many of you have been in worship with us since July. Many of you have been joining us virtually since last March. And the question becomes, how do we come out of this pandemic and be a church for all people? How do we strengthen things that need to be strengthened? And how do we maintain other things that are already strong, but could use some shoring up or some revitalization? So these are a lot of questions that we have been asking ourselves. And it started in October of last year. We created a committee of session leaders and elders, deacons, as well as some other key players, staff. And we asked the big questions of what should our focus be? And of that focus, we came to 4 subcommittees. One is relating to people. How do we relate to people after a pandemic? How do we relate to people as a church? Our mission is a huge part of who we are. So local mission became a subcommittee. For our food pantry ministries, for our community nursery school, we view them as a mission and an outlet of our congregation. And there has been moments where they've been really strong with us, and there have been moments where we're not on the same page. And so how do we become connected, as well as all other opportunities for us to be viewed as a church that is hyper-connected in the community? Youth and young families, a huge area of strength for us, but sometimes our Sunday school programs could use a shot in the arm. And then how can you come out of a pandemic and have our children and young people reconnected? So these are all very big questions that were asked. And then finally, endowment and stewardship. As most of you know, we have some debt service we're trying to pay off. And we're trying to think to the future of once that debt service is paid off, what do we do next? If funds come in to maintain and develop the endowment further, what do we do with those funds? Also, we have a campus that is quite large and requires upkeep. So what do we do there? And then the big question of what is an endowment? What is going into our endowment? And I think many of you know what an endowment is and what ours does, but not everyone does. So these are all these very large questions that came out. And I just want to thank at the outset, Neil and Gail, who you will see shortly. They've been tireless in their leadership and dedication. They have done so much behind the scenes that we will never know, but this presentation is a product of them. The countless emails and meetings that we have done over the last 6 months, that's a product of them. And we're just so grateful that we have a vision for the next 3 years. The strategic plan committee has prayed over this and analyzed and done a lot of immense things to make sure that we are all in the right spot. And here we are. So the session has approved this. This is our plan. And we will save questions for the end. But if you also have questions and you're watching this after this presentation, feel free to email myself or Fred. You can also send emails to Neil and Gail. I'm sure they would love that. Just echoing support. So the final thing I'll say before we turn it over is we kind of viewed everything like a puzzle, and everyone has a role to play in this. So some people like to build the edges of the puzzle and focus on that. And others like to get really involved in the puzzle pieces and connecting the dots. And so the overall large puzzle is, what are we as a church for the future? and what puzzle pieces will help that grow, such as growth and authenticity, ministries that need to be reimagined. Is virtual the wave of the future, or is it something that was necessary? These are all questions that we asked and focused on. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to one of our chairs, Neil Kubalis, and he's going to really get into the fun part of what were these subcommittees and what they did. So if you don't mind the camera moving, I'm going to bring this over to Neil.
Thank you, Justin. My name is Neil Kubalis, and I am one of the co-chairs of the Strategic Planning Committee. So I'm just going to reiterate a little bit. We're going to the next slide. Each group represents a piece of the puzzle that forms the strategic plan. So just again, the four groups are relating to people, local mission, youth and young families, and endowment and stewardship. So just wanted to acknowledge, so the chairs for the committees for relating to young people, people was Reverend Carmen. For local mission, it was Sarah Teddy. For youth and young families, Nancy Liardi. And for endowment and stewardship was Reverend Gary. So as we go on to the next slide, we're looking at the key themes. We took a lot of feedback from different people, from committee members and from congregants. And these are the ideas that rose to the top. So in fellowship and program events, one of the key themes there was, while the church and the spirituality is our heritage, we want to reach out to the community in both spiritual and secular ways, and be an opening and welcoming church, which we already are, but we want to continue in that path. As far as the space goes, the physical space, reimagining the fellowship space so that we'd get better use of the social center, and determine and encourage people to use it. The food pantry needs more space to serve the increased demand, which we're currently working on, and we'll see some exciting things going on in the food pantry this year. And then the CE building used by CNS. The plan there is really to make sure that we're getting multi-use out of it, and that it's good use for both CNS and for FPC. And then staffing and people. Our pastoral staff is focused on key areas, session, youth, and mission, et cetera. But we're currently at capacity. So we're coming up with some creative ideas that are needed to ensure that all the committees and programs have the needed leadership and guidance. Then we go on to the next topic, which is the website and communications. And the website is something that we saw, that Gail and I saw, really in every aspect of the strategic plan. That was one of the things that came back to us. That is really like the hub for communication. So we're re-envisioning the website as our front door, our virtual front door, making it easier for people to see us, to know what we're about. Also just for interactive things like registration forms, donations, all of those kind of things to make it more simple and more modern. And then as well as being user-friendly and just providing all kinds of communication. The last section here is endowments. We need to provide a better understanding of the endowment and what it means and how it's built. So we'll be working on that to educate everybody, so we all have an understanding of where the monies are being spent and how the programs are working, and when and how we use it to our best advantage. So at the end of this section, I would just say what the other theme that we really saw come from all of this is that the overall theme of the plan is growth of the church. It's embedded in every aspect of the strategic plan. And Gail will speak now and talk about the summary of findings.
Hi, everybody. Gail Stein here. Thank you for taking some time out to listen to some of the findings that we had. Before I go into that, I just want to make certain that there is going to be a link to the presentation that you're seeing now, and the link will have many more details. of what the committee's done, but for now, we're just going to give you a top line summary of what we found. And so for the folks that got together to talk about how we relate to people, in summary, it was all about fellowship and how we need to enhance our communications. Community outreach, as Neil said, needs to be a mix of both secular and spiritual, and it's up to us to determine what that perfect balance is. The social center, a place for fellowship, a hub for fellowship, it has the right space, and we just need to figure out how to enhance the time that we spend in the social center and how that leads to enhanced fellowship. Deacons are very, very important in how we relate to people. That's what they do. And so they need to play an expanded role, and they need to have dedicated pastoral leadership. And we'll talk a little bit about how that happens in a few moments. And then finally, as Neil said, the website plays a role in all of the committees for relating to people. The website does need to become our front door, and it needs to have all of the communications necessary and provide all of the information necessary to both our current membership and our potential new members. For local mission, we found that the food pantry definitely needs to be expanded, and that some of the services that we added during the pandemic need to either grow or stay as they are. And one of those things would be a delivery service that we put into place at the beginning of the pandemic. Community nursery school is a huge thing for our church. So therefore, we need to enhance the relationship that the church has with the nursery school. We need to have shared space, and we need to ensure that we have the right staff to manage the space and ensure that it is clean, especially coming out of this pandemic. Both the food pantry and CNS are very marketable for our church to the community. And here again, the website plays a very strong role, because the presence is needed here for people to sign up, to donate, and to volunteer. So again, something very important. When we talk about the group that focused on youth and young families, again, fellowship and outreach, both in a secular and spiritual way, were very important. And that again led to the importance of the social center as a fellowship hub. And we talked about a lot of different suggestions on how we could get the congregation used to making it that hub. And we'll go through that when we talk in a few minutes about our 3-year plan. We want to have more events. We want to have more programs and partnerships for our church and the community. And this led us to see the need for more volunteers and additional staffing in some areas. And we'll talk about that in our plan. And then again, when we talk about youth and young families, the website becomes very important, because we need that presence for youth and young families. That's the language that they speak. Everything is on the internet, so we need to make certain that we have the right presence for these communications. And then finally, when we talked about endowment and stewardship, we knew that we needed to have a new way to organize the funds that we have. And so we will develop a catalog to make it easier to see what those funds are. We also realize, as Justin said, that some people understand endowment, others don't. So we'll develop an endowment 101 session to educate anybody who's interested in this on how endowment work and how we build an endowment. Importantly, we want to develop and grow our preservation funds, because those are the funds that we need to maintain this campus. This is a large campus, multi-buildings, cemetery, all of that needs to be maintained. That does cost significant funds, and so we need to figure out how we're going to maintain that. Importantly, we want to endeavor to reduce the debt that we have on our mortgages, because some of those funds that could be saved by reducing debt can be moved to maintain our campus. And then finally, and again, the website presence, very important for information for seamless giving. So those were the summaries of findings. I know I went through it quickly, but as I said, if you click on the link, you can see much more detail about what all of that was about. So the next thing we want to talk about is how we bring it together. how we bring the puzzle pieces together, as you're seeing here. And in order to do that, we developed a 3-year action plan, which I'm going to give you a summary of right now. So there was a number of steps. We're going to talk about the goals in terms of year 1, year 2, year 3. The year is the church calendar year. It starts in September and it ends in August. So we talked a lot about the website, both Neil and I, when we were going through our slides here. The website needed to be re-envisioned and reimagined. It needs to be outward focused, user-friendly, and a very important communication too. So in year 1, we knew that we had to revise it. That's ongoing right now. And we plan to launch it, hopefully by Rally Day in September 2021. By year 2, the goal for the website would be to enhance the content based on the congregation, commissions, and committee feedback so that it becomes more of an interactive tool and an informational tool. And then by year 3, we hope that the website is robust enough so that we would need to hire a permanent staff member to keep the site current and vibrant. For CNS and our church, we identified the need for a better relationship and shared space. And we also want to review and revise the CNS policy and operational management. That's a lot to do. So again, we'll break this into 3 years. In year 1, we will launch a multi-purpose room that the church and the nursery school will share on different days. And importantly, we want to create a task force to review and revise CNS operations management. And we want to have the recommendations for these revised operations by June of 2022. In year 2, the goal would be to implement the revised nursery school operations, whatever the management recommendations we have come up with from our task force. And also we want to continue to integrate shared space between our church and CNS. And then in year 3, we want to continue to refine the CNS policy and revised operational management. And we want to establish a church and nursery school person advisory board in order to maintain the relationship that we've developed over the 3-year plan. The next one was staffing, and this included staffing in terms of our own church staff, people, and deacons, very important as we talked about earlier. So we want to consider additional outside pastors in addition to our pastoral staff right now, which is currently at the limits of their bandwidth. So we want to restructure the deacon leadership and bylaws in order for it to be pastor-led versus the current, which is individually deacon-led. And we want to encourage a senior ministry, and we'll talk about that more in a second. In year 1, we want to engage local pastors in other Presbyterian churches in the area to determine their interest and availability and see if they would like to spend some time with perhaps running our deacons. And of course, that would require some additional looking into our finances and our personnel commissions, but things that they could lead would include the deacon ministry so that it can be enhanced and play a larger role in fellowship and things like that. And we also want to address and establish a small group so that the deacons can have this leadership and so that we can include it in their bylaws. In the second year for staffing, we would imagine that we would have included some of the local pastors to lead our deacon ministry. And we talked before about a senior ministry. Here we're thinking about developing a grandparents ministry and also having a fellowship between youth and senior citizens so that our senior citizens can have additional fellowship and help with any of them that might be suffering from loneliness or isolation. We think that we can do this by teaming up some of our youth with some of our senior citizens within the congregation. And then finally, in year 3, we would evaluate the need for perhaps additional staff. Maybe it's a social worker to work with our clients within our food pantry, or maybe even some of the attendees from the nursery school. And we would include this in budget planning. So that's the 3-year plan that's behind staffing. When we talk about fellowship and outreach, we talked a lot about making the social center as the fellowship hub, and we talked a lot about having the balance between secular and spiritual events and programs. So in year 1, some of the suggestions that we had was to arrange to end Sunday school at the social center so that the parents who are at the services would then head over to the social center to pick up their kids and also potentially have fellowship there, or even a second hour forum there. And we would develop and schedule monthly programs and events within the social center to really get the congregation used to going to the social center for fellowship events. In year 2, we would think about perhaps purchasing golf carts to give ourselves the ability to ferry congregants over to the social center who may have trouble walking over there. And we would launch a full slate of these secular and spiritual programs in year 2, again, in the social center as the hub. And then finally, in year 3 of the fellowship and outreach programs, we would increase the use of the social center beyond the current programs to have even more programs. And by now we would hope that the social center had successfully become the hub for fellowship for our congregation and for our community. Moving on to the food pantry, we talked about the need for expanded space and expanded programs. In year 1, we would like to return to client choice so that we're not just packing bags for clients, we're allowing them to come in, give them the dignity to select their own needs. And this would also cut down on waste because people would be picking out the things that they need and eschewing the things that they don't. We would like to continue the deliveries, assuming that we had the right number of volunteers. And finally, in year 1, we want to select an architect for expanding the food pantry since it does need expanded space beyond what it has now. In year 2, we would hope that the physical expansion of the space of the food pantry has been completed and that the larger pantry is in operation. And by year 3, we would evaluate the need to join with other churches in the area that also have food pantries to further expand our services. The final thing we looked at was endowment and stewardship. And here we talked about providing access to an Endowment 101 session to explain how it works, and also to reduce our debt and grow our preservation fund. And the way we see this working in year 1 is to organize the fund into a catalog that's much more digestible and understandable, and creating that Endowment 101 secondary forum and expanding it and offering it for attendance. In year 2, we would hope to increase our current preservation fund to $350,000 by the end of year 2, and develop a plan or a fundraiser to address our debt reduction. As we said earlier, we have mortgages on both buildings, and we need to pay down that debt so that the funds that we're currently paying on those mortgages can be moved to other areas of need for our church. And then finally, in year 3, we would hope to reach our preservation fund goal of $500,000 so that we can start using that to maintain our campus. And we would hope to reduce our annual debt from what is now about $80,000 a year to $60,000 a year. That's a bit of a stretch, but we think we can do it. So that is our 3-year plan. And at this point, we would like to address any questions that any of you might have, either now live or by email. So I'll pause here and see if there are any questions. Doesn't look like there are right now, but again, you can contact us with anything you'd like to discuss.
Awesome. So you have seen quite the 3-year plan. And all of this is a testament to our subcommittees who met monthly to pose the questions and poke and prod. And then all that data was put together by Neil and Gail, brought to session over multiple periods. Here we are. And there's a lot of changes here. Using the social center for almost all after worship refreshments, changing the church around so that it is more multifunction, multi-purpose, and more post-COVID friendly. Breaking our debt down, hiring an architect, and expanding our space for the food pantry, which insider information, architect is hired already. And we're moving very quickly, hopefully even ahead of year 2, to get ground broken on this food pantry expansion, because it is sorely needed right now. And that leaves us with a thank you to everyone who's been involved, but also a huge thank you, I should have said this at the beginning, to the previous strategic plan and all the hard work they did. It's very cool to see their strategic plan from 3 years prior, well, actually almost 5 years prior, and everything that they had on their plan was accomplished. I hope the same for us. And if not that, something similar, like maybe not a golf cart, but maybe something similar, just dropping that hint. You never know. So Gail, Neil, thank you. It means a lot. And now how we go forward is the staff will have a retreat at Brenda's Lake House in August, which is normally eating and having a few libations, driving 4-wheelers and fishing. But we're going to throw in some work this time and focus on, okay, as staff, what can we do to make this all transpire and happen? So yeah, it is a unique time in this church, but it's a unique time for all churches. So we're no different, but I feel like we are also way ahead of the curve and asking these questions right now. So again, any questions you may have, send them our way. If you want to be involved in any of this, or you have any other suggestions that can make some of these plans take off quicker, we're all ears. I'm going to close this in prayer, and then I hope this presentation finds you well and encouraged, as our church is in a great spot for the future. Loving God, thank you again for an opportunity to be your people and lead this community of faith. Nurture, guide us, and compel us to courageously move forward, given this plan and other plans to come. And everything we do, we show your love. Amen. Thank you, everyone. We hope you have a great night. I am going to stop the recording now.